In my endless search for interesting forms of entertainment, I've come across many strange and odd little things, like those RPG Maker games I like talking about. Recently, I've discovered another RPG Maker game that may be considered a sort of classic among some circles, and it may be the most bizarre game I've covered so far. That game is, of course, Dark Hero Party, also known as Thug Hero Party. It was developed by the indie dev U-Room, released in 2015, and got an official English translation in 2020. If you look at the Steam page, it may look like your average run-of-the-mill RPG. This is a deception. It doesn't even hint at its true nature, the fact that it's an NTR game. Okay, I can see that some are already running at the mention of NTR. Allow me to explain myself. For the unaware, NTR is short for Nitorer. It's a certain fetish involving adultery. Usually there's a relationship, then a third party enters the mix and takes one from the other, typically using blackmail and degradation. This is obviously a very sad topic and not something I'd usually be into. I'm not exactly sure why it's so popular, but whatever. Anyway, while NTR may be scary to many, Dark Hero Party actually uses NTR as a vehicle to explore other ideas, like oppression, the abuse of power, and feminism. It's still an NTR game, and you'll be suffering through some very uncomfortable scenes, but the story does have a surprising amount of depth and genuinely cool ideas. Do be warned that this is a very depressing story, so if you want a lighthearted JRPG adventure, this isn't for you. I call it the Drakengard of NTR games mostly as a joke, but there may be some truth to that statement. Without further ado, let's talk about Dark Hero Party and what makes it so fascinating. Dark Hero Party starts as many RPGs do, with our protagonist and cuck of the story, Emos, living a peaceful life. He lives with his half-sister, Tori, and they both run a potion shop. Emos himself has no talent for making medicine, so he's stuck doing all the manual labor. They're soon put into the actual gameplay as Emos is tasked with gathering ingredients. The gameplay here is something that's fascinating to me. Not exactly the gameplay itself, it's fairly standard RPG Maker stuff, but rather the way it's used to reinforce the themes of the story and feel immersed in the character of Emos. Usually in RPGs like this, you're a valiant hero who slays countless monsters with effortless ease. But Emos is not that, though he tries to be. He's just an average guy, perhaps even worse than that, as Tori is also normal, yet is far more useful in gameplay because she's able to use her knowledge to make small bombs and such. By himself, Emos struggles to defeat normal slimes, the most basic of Dragon Quest enemies. The best skill he has is flailing about randomly, just hoping to hit something. This skill frequently misses, and even when it does hit, it hardly does any damage. These early battles, while not exceptionally difficult, can be dangerous for Emos, which is why it's better to avoid unnecessary encounters, a general trend throughout the game. When Emos finally encounters a monster that has the materials he needs, he recklessly attempts to fight it, despite knowing of his own weakness. The monster is basically an oversized bee, yet Emos still gets completely annihilated. His childhood friend, Lotia, has to come and bail him out. He beats the monster with ease and heals Emos' wounds. This whole scene is extremely important. The game throws you into this unwinnable fight. Despite your best attempts, Emos stands no realistic chance against this enemy. It's a very basic monster, but Emos is so weak, even that is too much for him. I hear some people hate unwinnable encounters in games. Dark Hero Party does this a number of times. It serves a purpose to really make you feel as powerless as Emos. In other games, it might be annoying to be doing well in gameplay, but suddenly you see a cutscene of the protagonist losing. A great example would be a lot of the Enforcer fights in Kiseki, where you'll be dominating them. Then they'll reveal they've been holding back their true power, and now decide to get serious and wipe your whole party instantly. I actually find those scenes to be pretty cool, but I can understand why some would be annoyed by them. It can be weird being forced to lose when you weren't actually struggling at all in the fight. In Dark Hero Party, the unwinnable fights feel more earned because both narratively and in gameplay, Emos is hopelessly outmatched. No matter how much you or Emos might want to play the hero, you can't because of Emos' lack of strength. This game is not a power fantasy, it's an anti-power fantasy. This is not a story of heroes, this is a story of cuckoldery. This encounter is even more humiliating because Lotia, a girl, has to save him, which makes Emos look extremely pathetic. It's usually the girlish childhood friend character that's in need of saving, so the game immediately doing a reversal of this makes Emos look bad in comparison. Emos himself is quite interesting in how he's characterized. He's well aware of how weak he is, but often stubbornly tries to overcome whatever comes his way in spite of that. This is immediately shown when he tries to fight the bee, when knowing that it's stronger than him. He's frustrated by his inability to be useful or help those he loves. This frustration is a feeling shared with the player, both frustrated by Emos' weakness and the impossible situations he finds himself in. This shared frustration unites the player and Emos. This character quirk is what makes Emos such an endearing protagonist, despite all of his shortcomings. This moment sets the tone for the whole game. This is a story about trying and failing to protect anyone because of Emos' weakness. So, on the topic of Lotia, as stated, she's Emos' childhood friend, and she obviously has a thing for Emos, in spite of his own patheticness. She's also what's known as a Draco Valis, someone bestowed power by a dragon, which in this world are essentially deities. Draco Valis are gifted this power to battle against the forces of the Demon Lord, the natural enemy of humans and dragons. Essentially, she's the opposite of Emos in some ways. She's a hero granted power for a righteous cause. She seems one more worthy of the protagonist role of an RPG, yet here we are stuck with Emos. Anyway, the two of them together are able to get the materials Tori needs. This ends the day. The next day, Emos, Tori, and Lotia take a visit to Lotia's patron dragon to renew the contract between the two, as such things need to be done occasionally, or else a Draco Valley will lose their power. They're joined by Aina, a fellow Draco Valis, tomboyish princess and friend to Emos. She's a very cool character, one of the best in the game, but we'll get to that later. What's noteworthy about all this is that you're finally given a full party to use. The combat, while not exceptionally complex, starts to become enjoyable. This also makes it all the more obvious how completely useless Emos is. Everyone does good damage and has all these useful abilities. Then there's Emos, who either misses or badly does damage. In addition, he dies pretty easily because his health is lower than everyone else's. Thankfully, this doesn't give you a game over, but it's hilarious how often this will happen. He's dead weight, being carried by the girls around him who are vastly more capable than he is. He doesn't contribute much of any value to the party, except maybe as a distraction for enemies. I genuinely love this story-to-gameplay integration. It's meant to be frustrating and make you feel powerless as Emos. It kind of reminds me of Drakengard. In Drakengard, the battles are meant to be very monotonous and repetitive, to demonstrate what a mindless chore killing people is. Yoko Taro did not think it should be fun to kill people, so it made it as tiresome as possible. And of course, all the wearisome killing will make the player as insane as Kaim probably is. In Dark Hero Party, Yuru made playing as Emos as pathetic as Emos himself. Battles where he's by himself aren't supposed to be fun, they're supposed to make the player feel miserable and powerless. Both Drakengard and Dark Hero Party use the gameplay to make the players feel negatively, which in turn can be more immersive into the setting and enhance the themes of the story. Another thing, Dark Hero Party is a primarily narrative-driven experience. There isn't as much gameplay as you might expect, but gameplay segments exist. All exist to further the story and themes of the game. Getting back on track, the group does eventually meet up with those patron dragons and perform the ritual. However, the dragons warn them of a rather problematic Draco Valis that's been causing trouble. Hopefully this guy doesn't cause any problems for us in the near future. The next day, Emos' precious little life is completely shattered when his village is raided by a gang of thugs. Again, there's a really great character moment for him here. He wants to help Tori drive away these thugs, but she urges him to run away and try to help others. Here, a normal protagonist might step up, refuse, and instead stand and fight with their sister. We're dealing with Emos, however. He's aware of his own weakness and runs off like a coward. The way he runs is funny. He's dashing out of the screen as fast as possible. Emos rushes to the church, where we're finally introduced to Thrash. If Emos is the cuckold of the story, then Thrash is our chat. The game tells you no lies about him. He's a bastard who uses his status as Draco Valis as an excuse to rape and pillage as he pleases, under the pretext he's gathering resources for the war against the Demon Lord. His own patron dragon is willing to turn a blind eye to his misdeeds because he's strong and potentially useful in the battle against the Demon Lord. Essentially, he's everything Emos isn't. Emos is pathetically weak, but the one thing he has going for him is he's generally a nice guy, which might not sound too impressive until you see people like Thrash. Thrash is completely self-centered, arrogant, and treats women like objects. He's like Rance, but without any of Rance's redeeming qualities. What's worse, he's someone blessed with power, so he can take anything he wants by force, without anyone being able to stop him. This introduction is him making short work of Lotia, who until now has been one of the strongest characters we know and constantly reliable. His sheer strength is terrifying. Thrash here is meant to show how Draco Valis, despite them supposedly being the heroes of the world, aren't all of such virtuous character. We'll see more examples later, but Thrash is perhaps the biggest defender of abusing his status and power as Draco Valis to serve his own self-interests. Back to the story. Lotia is defeated by Thrash, with Emos being powerless to do anything. He couldn't even save the nun from being assaulted by Thrash's goons. Thrash offers Lotia an ultimatum. She comes with him and joins his band of merry ruffians, and in exchange, he'll spare the rest of the village. Lotia, being the selfless hero she is, agrees. Although, Thrash changes his mind the next day and demands that Tori and the nun, whose name is Crimina, are taken with them as well. The village elder is more than happy to sell them all out in order to protect the rest of the village. Even thanks Thrash for his generosity. This might sound like a scumbag thing to do, but can you really blame them for selling the gang out, given the circumstances? The players, up to this point, are made to feel a certain degree of disgust towards weakness, especially through gameplay. The actions of the villagers here are meant to highlight the inability of the weak to promote or protect anything positive in the world. The villagers are unable to beat Thrash, so the best they can hope for is that he leaves the rest of them alone if they surrender a few women. Emos, obviously concerned with how these women will be treated, goes along with them as well. They're a party, a dark hero party. Thus ends the prologue. I probably won't go into as much depth as this for the rest of the game, but I wanted to talk about what makes the prologue so fantastic. It sets up all the core ideas of the narrative and the inevitable tragedy that follows. It nails the idea of powerlessness through the gameplay as well as the story. As a player, you're powerless to stop any of the bad things that will happen. All you can do is sit and watch, much like Emos himself. If this opening wasn't a good enough indication, the story gets very dark. You'll understand why there's a despair stat in the menu. Just try to guess how high it'll get before the end. Emos might have joined the Dark Hero Party, but he's treated with no respect by Thrash and his men. He's a glorified janitor that's given the noble job of scrubbing toilets. One of my favorite moments in the game and displaying Emos' weakness comes shortly after the prologue. Emos and friends are doing some reconnaissance, so Thrash can judge their combat abilities. Before the boss battle, Thrash comes out, points out that Emos is terribly weak and kicks him out of the party. Emos even gets cucked out of his position in the party menu by Thrash. What's really sad about this is that as a player, it feels good to have Emos replaced with someone that's actually competent, even if it's scum like Thrash. Playing with Thrash in the party instead of Emos most clearly shows the sheer difference in power between the two. While Emos was a burden, Thrash can dish out big damage and has abilities that complement the other party members well. As a player, you may hate Thrash for his attitude and crimes, but you also cannot deny his power and usefulness in battle. You can almost understand why his patron dragon is willing to turn a blind eye to Thrash's evil. You have to wonder how much Thrash would accomplish if he was seriously committed to fighting the Demon Lord. Of course, he's not interested at all in that. He'd much rather take the easy route of petty banditry. Beating the Demon Lord would bring peace, and he wouldn't have any further excuses for his pillaging. On the topic of Thrash, he's a surprisingly compelling character. He's not exactly complex. He's a pretty simple scumbag. There's the kind of odd curiosity in me that enjoys seeing how awful he is, and wonders how low he will go. In some cases, he ends up looking better than Emos purely because he's not all talk, and has the power to do as he pleases. Ironically, he often ends up rewarded in spite of his actions, while Emos is constantly punished and beaten in his attempts to protect his friends. It all goes to show that having good intentions or a noble heart isn't enough. Power is necessary to enact your views of justice. Without it, you'll end up trampled by those with power. It's the winners that write history and define what justice is, after all. I also find Thrash's relationship with Lotia to be quite interesting. It is an NTR story, so you know he'll end up cucking Emos eventually, but the way it's handled is unique. When the dragons were warning their party of Thrash in the beginning, they cast a protection spell on Lotia and Aina to protect their chastity. Thrash learns of this, so he knows he can't simply take her by force without risking severe injury or death. So he resorts to scheming and manipulation to get her to have sex with him willingly. Lotia, on the other hand, goes along with Thrash's demands because she believes she's doing it to protect Emos. While her desire to protect Emos is noble, her actions are also what causes him pain and cause a rift to form between the two. With Emos being so weak and constantly being beaten, it's natural for him, as well as the player, to want to get stronger. Surely there's a way, right? I mean, there's a leveling system, but level ups for him change so little that it hardly matters. That's why I got excited when I saw an equipment store in Thrash's town. After all the suffering you've been through so far, maybe getting new gear will finally make you more useful. After all, that's how it works in all RPGs. You get to a new town, get new equipment so you can have an easier time with the nearby enemies. However, this is not a typical RPG, this is Dark Hero Party. Imagine my surprise to get into the next combat area to find that the new sword and armor were insignificant. To add insult to injury, for this area you're joined by Ace, who is basically Thrash's right-hand man and another Draco Valis. He's responsible for assaulting Tori, and throughout the whole area, he's harassing her. As reprehensible as Ace is, he is fun to use in battle, way better than Emos. He's fast, so he can act twice in a turn, so he's really strong. As frustrating as it is, Emos is useless yet again. It makes sense, just getting new equipment won't suddenly make up for Emos' innate weakness. A new longsword does little for someone who doesn't know how to use it. Perhaps the most remarkable part of the game at making you feel Emos' helplessness is a bit later, when Aina has been captured by Thrasher's even more evil brother, Scum. Emos embarks on a desperate rescue mission, but he's aided by the only ally he's found among Thrasher's men, a fellow weakling named Grey. He gives Emos some cutting-edge weapons that can emulate the power of Draco Valis. These weapons are called Dragonizers and are hyped up a bit. You know Draco Valis are strong, so this might be the thing Emos needs to finally become a hero. As you might expect by now, that doesn't happen, and instead you get the most depressing and humiliating segment in the game. The weapons are decent enough, but eventually you'll get to a point where you can find an enemy you just can't beat. Even if you use up all the high damage weapons, it's still not enough. Emos is defeated, but just being beaten once isn't enough. Emos tries again and again to save Aina. Every time he's defeated, he's sent to the start and has to wait several hours before trying again. In between attempts, you retrieve the scenes of Aina being assaulted by Scum. You're powerless to save her or prevent her situation from getting any worse. This goes on for 7 attempts until Thrash, Lotia, and another Draco Valis suddenly show up and handle the situation with ease. It really hammers the point home about how true justice cannot exist without power to enforce it. Okay, so after seeing Thrash and Scum, you might be thinking something like, surely not all the Draco Valen are this bad. There have to be some decent ones like Lotia and Aina. You'd be correct, partway through the story, another Draco Valen named Asayam is introduced. He's the prince of a certain nation, leader of the faction of Draco Valen fighting at the front lines in the battle against the Demon Lord. He steps in to intervene during a particularly brutal encounter between Lotia and Thrash. On paper, he is picturesque. He seems like an ideal hero, righteous and courteous. However, what's fascinating is how the game portrays him as a tool at the best of times, and at the worst, a naive fool. He shows clear disgust towards Thrash's treatment of women, but doesn't actually punish him for his behavior. Much like the dragons, he begrudgingly turns a blind eye to Thrash being an awful human being, as long as he accompanies him to the front lines and helps in the battle against the Demon Lord. What's more, he's pretty easily manipulated by Thrash to distrust Emos and seem generally unaware of all the corruption that goes down in Thrash's town. Asayam's chauvinistic ideals are also torn down throughout the story. He wants to create a peaceful nation ruled by women, but also hypocritically believes that women need to be protected by men. This hypocrisy is called out by Aina. Aina is someone that values her personal freedom above all else and is the most skeptical of Asayam. She also immediately realizes that Asayam doesn't truly love her. He simply had a surface level crush on her based on her appearance and reputation, making up his own ideas of what she's like despite not actually knowing anything about her. This is immediately after being tormented by Scum. It still has the inner to reject Asayam, who offers easy protection. If she didn't question him and reject his love, then things would have been a lot easier for her. It would guarantee her protection against Scum or any other threats. However, that would mean giving up part of her freedom, which to her is unacceptable. Her short exchange with Asayam here is one of the highlights of the game for me, because of how much it reveals about both characters. Anyway, I believe the whole purpose of Asayam's character is to show that while a decent Draco Valis may exist, he also exists within the same system that allows people like Thrash and Scum to exist. The whole system is corrupt and the power they wield is so easy to abuse. The good Draco Valis don't make up for the corrupt ones, especially when they're incentivized to ignore their peers' wrongdoings in the name of working together to overcome the Demon Lord. The whole Draco Valis system makes it so a person's value is determined by their usefulness rather than their general humanity. It's a sickeningly utilitarian system that can protect the world at the cost of neglecting the weak. Also, Asayam's ascent to Thrash and Scum's existence plays on the idea that Dark Hero Party, much like our own world, functions as a result of relatively good people turning a blind eye to evil people in society, because those same people likely facilitate some of society's most valuable services. Thrash and Scum's help against the Demon Lord isn't so different from the services provided by scummy CEOs of far too big companies, but to an extent are seen as necessary. I think I've said all I need to about most of the game, but to talk about what makes Dark Hero Party special, I'll have to go deep into spoiler territory, discussing the different endings. If anything I've said so far has sounded intriguing and you believe you can handle the bleak content, then I encourage you to try it. You can get the game on Steam or on the Kagura Games Store. If you do get it off Steam, then know you need to get the patch on Kagura Games for the full experience. It's a short game that you can finish in a day, and despite its questionable content, I'd say it's a quality NTR RPG. Spoiler start now. Okay, for those sticking around, should already be familiar with the story. Emos has lost everything he cared about. His sister and his beloved Lotia have betrayed him. After enduring despair that would crush an average person, he aims to return home, be a good little cuck and settle down, but perhaps a different outcome is possible. Yes, a voice reaches out to him and asks him if he's okay with this course of events. Of course, Emos isn't. He speaks out of all the anger he can muster, and for the first time, he has a face. This moment is incredible. This is when he casts off the shackles of being a typical self-insert NTR guy and asserts his own identity. He's finally taking agency over his story and becomes the protagonist he was always meant to be. The Demon Lord Al and the Demon Dragon Vahernovich become his allies, united in their anger towards this twisted world. I love how Al, the guy that's been hyped up as the Demon Lord that's trying to destroy the world, is just another guy who suffered just like Emos has because of the world. He's likely the same person Emos dreams about at the very beginning of the story. Vahernovich isn't necessarily evil. He's a representation of all the suffering in the world caused by the Queen of Dragons Dracovalis system. If anything, she comes across as the only ally of the weak in a world that favors the strong. She bestows power to Emos. All the despair and suffering he's undergone throughout the story has now become his strength. You're given a chance to walk around and fight enemies with Emos' newfound power. This feels so liberating. After being useless the whole game, Emos is now so strong he can kill enemies by himself with ease. He's actually fun to play as with his new abilities. Yeah, it's at the very end of the game where it feels like the combat really starts to open up and items become useful. There's a 1-year time skip where Emos slumbers to adapt to even greater power. After that, he's a full Demon Lord and finally ready for his destined clash against Thrash. This confrontation is spectacular. Emos isn't doing this for justice or because it's the right thing to do. He's motivated purely by revenge. Thrash, on the other hand, might actually be trying to do some good for the first time. I mean, he's assaulting the Demon Lord's stronghold along with the other Dracovalis, something he was opposed to earlier. They might have had to coax him into helping, but it's unknown what's truly motivating him at this point. The ambiguity of this whole situation is fascinating to me. The game, up to this point, has shown nothing but contempt for Thrasher's excess of exercising his power, and it's only now that Emos has the power to match him that the game asks the question, is this really the right thing to do? This might be because, in the end, Emos had to succumb to the same power as Thrash has. This reinforces the idea throughout the game that goodwill means nothing without the power to back it up. The battle itself is immaculate. It's pure catharsis after all the hell he's put Emos through. The music and presentation here is perfect. You beat Thrash down, fueled by the rage of all those who have been cucked before. After you defeat him, there's a huge split that determines what ending you get. You can spare him, where Emos spends the rest of his days with Vahernovich, which is cute, but it's not truly satisfying, is it? Of course, Emos and the player must long for the death of Thrash, as punishment for all his countless crimes. This, in a way, proves Thrasher's might makes right mentality as correct, as he's overcome by someone stronger than him who decides his fate. This is a natural end for Thrash in his philosophy. When strength determines everything, eventually you'll be met with someone that's stronger. Killing him will result in Lotia rushing up and seeing what Emos has become. She's furious with him. She claims that everything she's done has been for Emos' sake, but is that really true? He seems to have become somewhat attached to Thrash, and she has already had a child with him and claims that he was starting to become a good man because of her. This claim is dubious, but as stated before, he did come to fight the Demon Lord and create a more peaceful world, something that wouldn't benefit him if he wanted to continue pillaging. We don't know exactly what Thrash has been doing in the past year, so it's all left to the audience's interpretation. The claim of doing everything for Emos is also quite ironic. It's the excuse she's always had for going along with Thrash and eventually having sex with him. She says this while ironically hurting Emos and pushing him away. It seems more like she's indecisive. She's afraid to truly commit to Emos, but finds herself attracted to Thrash in spite of his awful behavior. She wants to keep Emos around because he represents the safety and innocence of her earlier days, yet also uses him as an excuse for giving in to her inhibitions. Her anger towards Emos also goes back to a conversation they have earlier, where Lotia expresses that she's happy that Emos hasn't killed anyone. She says she doesn't want him to change and kill people, to keep being the kind Emos that she knows. After seeing him kill Thrash, she's upset and unable to accept how much they've both changed. No matter what, a battle ensues, where Emos is killed by Lotia. That would be a fitting end for him, taken up by the person he loves the most, after becoming a monster. That's what would happen, unless Emos takes the monsters he created with him in the battle against Thrash. In which case, a monster bearing the appearance of Lotia appears behind her and kills her. Yeah, nobody really wins here. Revenge for Emos is ultimately unfulfilling. Unlike many power fantasy revenge stories where the protagonist can do no wrong, here Emos is still kind of pathetic in some ways. Despite his newfound power, the power he gained can only hurt people. He could never protect those close to him. Being responsible for the death of Lotia drives Emos into further despair and awakens more power within him. This was all part of Bahernish's plan, as she always intended to drive one of her demon lords into further despair by having them realize the futility of their revenge. They're transported to the realm of dragons, taking the fight to them directly. If it wasn't already obvious, this section of the game really makes it abundantly clear how deep the corruption of the world goes. Venice, the Queen of Dragons, created the Dracovala system to separate what she considered to be strong, beautiful humans from the rest. She loves humanity, but ultimately created a system that divided them between weak and strong, winners and losers. She has a social Darwinist way of thinking. She only cares about the strong, while the weak are oppressed due to their lack of power. All the other dragons are complicit in the system and use humans to fight their proxy wars. It's right from top to bottom. It's revealed that Thrasher wasn't always a scumbag, and it was his dragon that encouraged him to use his power selfishly, because it would make him easier to control. Thrasher is actually another victim of the world that was molded to be the way he is, to be a better tool. What's more, Thrasher was told to go to Emos' village because he was told by his dragon. It was all a scheme between his dragon and Lotia's dragon to unite the two, because the two dragons are lovers. The dragons use humans as tools, without regard to their own feelings or humanity. They don't even suffer repercussions because they're basically gods. It's a reflection of the real world, where those at the very top, the ultra-wealthy and powerful, benefit while dividing the common people among themselves. What's more, the cycle of violence won't ever end. Even if their Dracovalis manage to defeat the demon dragon, they'll simply be reborn eventually. Bahernich is a manifestation of humanity's despair and hate. As long as those persist, she will continue to exist. It's an endless cycle that toys with the lives of humans for the amusement of the dragons. Who knows how long this cycle has gone on for until now? How many lives have been used by these monsters? The dragons are ultimately the core problem of the world. They need to be dealt with. So going on a rampage here and killing all the important dragons is satisfying. Eventually, our dark heroes manage to get to the Queen of Dragons herself, Venice. The audacity of this woman to say that Emos could have created a better world if he did turn into a monster. He was screwed over by the very system she created, destined to always be a loser because he lacked strength. He only got this far because he turned all of his agony he endured into power. Enough power to challenge even those who made the world so twisted. Emos isn't just a representation of all those who have been cucked. He's a representation of all the powerless people of the world who have suffered at the hands of those who were born into power. Like all good JRPGs, the game ends with a showdown with a god. It's also symbolic of the themes of the story. This is the only real challenging fight in the game, where you actually need to use debuffs and buffs properly. After an arduous battle, peace was brought to the world, or so you think. Unlike most other JRPGs I've played, killing God did not automatically solve all the world's issues. In fact, it created entirely new ones. Venice represented all good in humanity, their desire to reproduce their strength. If they're dead, all of humanity seems to be suffering from a kind of apathy. Everyone has lost their desires and don't even feel like reproducing. It creates a peaceful world, but one of slow stagnation and eventual death. This is when you offer the final choice of the game, to keep the world as it is, leaving humanity to its eventual demise, or to say that you're not satisfied with the way things are. This is an interesting dilemma. It asks if this peaceful utopia that will eventually lead to extinction is preferable to the previous endless cycle of conflict and violence. Accepting a world like this is like denying all the good humans are capable of because of humanity's capacity for evil. Accepting a peace like that might sound appealing to some, but one also needs to consider that passion and desire is what makes life worth living. It's unfortunate that conflict is so ingrained into human nature, but one has to accept that's how humans are, and it's not worth sacrificing all that makes life worthwhile in order for a peaceful utopia. The latter option, to remain unsure of this new world, is considered the final and true end of the game. As humanity regain their desires, and the cycle of violence and systematic oppression will inevitably start again. It is human nature, after all. Still, I believe this ending leaves on the most optimistic note. It means accepting humanity's flaws and capacity for cruelty, but understanding that humanity is more than just that, and deserves to be allowed to exist. Bahernich is the one who ultimately allows humanity to be given another chance after witnessing a miraculous child born after humanity lost their desires. She does this because she loves humanity. Unlike Venice, who only loved those she considered beautiful, Bahernich accepts all. The strong, the weak, the winners, the losers, all are worthwhile to her. She hopes for a better future for humanity, one where the cycle is truly broken. This final scene could also be seen as a call to action towards the audience as well. He's directly looking at the player in the scene, with how the world of Dark Hero Party is reflective of many real-world issues. I think the nerd wants the player to think about injustice in reality and how one could improve the world. Emo sacrifices himself, so perhaps Aina and Tori can have a future at least. Anya is the only one that stayed loyal to Emos until the end. Even after all that she suffered, she was able to easily see through all the slander directed towards Emos. He's the one that comes to say goodbye to him at the end and thank him as he disappears. Well, that was Dark Hero Party. For a JRPG about NTR, it tackles some fascinating subject matter and does so masterfully. Writing about it has given me an even greater appreciation for the game. I think it's a worthwhile experience that I encourage open-minded people to try. I'm glad this is how I started 2024, with something so unique and niche. Uroom's other game, Prey game, also looks quite interesting. I'll be sure to play it and talk about it sometime in the future. Thanks once again to my good friend Chestnut Rants for editing the script. If you made it this far, thanks for watching.